Okay, good evening, everybody. We are up to the Gemara on Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, Maseches Berachos. We began the fourth parak yesterday. Just a very quick reminder of how we started. We started talking about the Zmanim for all the tefillos. So the Mishnah told us that the tefillos HaShachar... I'm good. It's good, like this. I'm fine. Thank you. So the tefillah of Shachris, the morning tefillah, the Mishnah tells us goes until Chatzos. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you don't get all the way until midday. You only get until 4 hours into the day. Mincha, we learned in the Mishnah, goes until the evening. We mentioned yesterday the evening, Erev, evening, is a very unclear term. It's not very clear what that means. We mentioned that Rashi says Ad Chashecha, and other Rishonim say that it goes only until Shkia Sachama, till sunset, which is not Chashecha. Chashecha generally means Tzeis HaKochavim, and other Rishonim say that you have more time. We'll spend a couple minutes talking about what the halacha is l'maaseh in a few minutes. And then we have, Rabbi Yehuda tells us that Mincha goes until Plaga Mincha. We described yesterday what Plaga Mincha is, and again, that was when you split the time between Mincha and the end of the day. And again, I'm intentionally being pretty unclear about how to split these times because the Gemara goes through this. The Gemara on the next side of the daf discusses exactly what Plaga Mincha is. But again, whenever Mincha is, from Mincha until Shkia, you'll cut that Zman in half. Just a sneak peek, as we mentioned yesterday, generally we go from the second mincha, in other words, what we call mincha katana, which is 9.5 hours into the day. So you take that period of time, slice it in half, that's plaga mincha. Mincha gedola is from 6.5 hours into the day. Plaga mincha is not the halfway point between that and shkia sachama. Tefillah Erev, the evening tefillah, which is ma'ariv, ein lo keva, there is no time by which it expires. A person could daven ma'ariv all night until Shachris, and then V'shal Musafim Kol Hayom Musaf B'daven all day. We started off yesterday with the Gemara asking a stira. The stira that the Gemara asked was that it seems like the time for Shachris is Hanei Tzachama, which is when the sun comes up. It doesn't sound like you have such an extended period of time. The Gemara says, yeah, that's for Vasikin. That doesn't mean that that's the end. That's for very meticulous people. They daven very early, but it's not a requirement. And then we asked another question. We're going to start with this again just to bring it down. The Gemara asks, this is the last line before it starts to get really wide. V'kuli alma chatzos, everybody else who's davening shachris, they only have until chatzos, until midday. V'sulo, they can't daven afterwards. The problem is, v'amar of Mari, breder v'yehuna, breder v'yirmiyah, bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan. We have this statement which followed all the way through from Rabbi Yochanan, which says, Ta'a, a person made a mistake, v'lo spal arvis, a person forgot to daven ma'ariv. What's the halacha? He wakes up in the morning, says, oh my gosh, I forgot to daven ma'ariv last night. The halacha is mispal shachris shtayim. He makes up the missed ma'ariv by davening the tefillah of Shmon Esrei for shachris twice. If a person forgot to daven shachris, then mispal mincha shtayim. He forgets shachris, he davens 2 minchas. So what do we see clearly? That you forget to daven shachris, no problem. Just daven it later in the day. So it seems very clear from this price over here that if you forgot to daven shachris, even though it's already past mincha time, no problem. You could still check off your shachris after mincha. So why are you telling me that your shachris time expires at midday? It seems like you could daven shachris at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The Gemara says, Kuli yoma matzli ve'azil. Ad chatzos yahavile schar tefila bizmana mikan ve'elech schar tefila yahavile schar tefila bizmana lo yahavile. The Gemara creates this distinction between schar of tefila and schar of tefila bizmana. They're two different things. Schar of tefila means that a person gets schar for davening. That's beautiful. A person can always get schar for davening. But there's a unique schar, a unique reward, a unique recognition for a person who davens on time. That is only going to be checked off during the time frame that our Mishnah listed. This is all the Gemara that we learned yesterday. And the Gemara asks the following question. Tov lo ispalo mincha. The person forgets and doesn't daven mincha. What's the halacha? Mahu sheyispalo arvis beis. Can he daven ma'ariv twice? What's the shaila? Gemara explains. Im tim salomar. We'll see in a minute. Tavlo spell arvis mispal shachris shtayim mishum dechad yomahu. We could understand why if a person misses Ma'ariv, then the next day when he wakes up, he could have in Shachris twice. Why? Because it's the same day. We know the Hebrew calendar starts at night. So therefore we know Vayihi Erev Vayivoker. The Hebrew calendar starts at night. So you miss Ma'ariv, no problem. So go ahead, pick it up with Shachris. And as the Gemara explains, Vayi Erev Vayivoker. A day starts in the evening, and that's Yom Echad. Aval Hacha, in this case, Tefillah b'makom karban. It seems like we are giving the specific time frame for each tefillah, because that's when that particular karban was brought. So now hold on. The kiven d'avra yomo, batal karbano. There are certain karbanos, like a karban tamid, which needs to be brought on its specific day. You miss it, you miss it. And therefore it would seem that if you missed your opportunity to bring your karban tamid, which is your tefillas mincha, so then you can't just come by Ma'ariv and daven it. You're out. It's the wrong day. It's no longer the same day. The karban tamid has expired. O Dilma, maybe kiven de tzlusa rachmihi kol emas debai matzli va'azol. The Gemara says maybe davening is just about soliciting HaKadosh Baruch Hu for rachmanis, for mercy, for compassion. And you know what? There's never a bad time to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for rachamim. So therefore, maybe, if you want to be very strict about it, says the Gemara, if it's really representative of a karban, well, hold on. If you miss a karban, over yomo, batal karbano. You missed the day. You can't bring a karban from yesterday today. But maybe tefillah has something very unique about it. Now, however the Gemara answers the question, I think we have to recognize the two things that a tefillah has. First of all, tefillah certainly is like bringing a karban. Unashalma par misvasenu. We're going to lay this week in Meretz Hashem Parsha Shkalim. Parsha Shkalim. The Shabura tells us the reason why we lay in Parsha Shkalim, even though we're not really collecting a real machzas Hashem to buy karbanos anymore. But unashalma par misvasenu, because our tefillos, when we actually use our mouths to utter our tefillos, it's as if we're bringing a karban. So we have that opportunity to be able to bring karbanos by coming to tefillah. That's certainly fact number one. Fact number two is that tefillos are an opportunity for a person to get HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give us rachamim, to give us compassion. And therefore, maybe we don't have to be so stickler about when that tefillah comes out. Ka'emas debai, whenever you want, matzli va'az, you could always daven. The Gemara says and tries to bring a riot. Tashema, Dam Rav Huna bar Yehuda, Amr Rav Yitzchak, Rav Huna, the son of Yehuda, son named Rav Yitzchak, Amr Rav Yochanan, named Rav Yochanan, Ta'a, person made a mistake. Lo spala mincha, mispala arvishtayim. Ve'ein bazeh mishum de'avra yom batal karbano. Very clear, open and shut. It's explicitly clear that if a person misses mincha by mistake, he can make it up by Ma'ariv. We're not going to be so strict about the representation of the karban, and therefore a person always has the opportunity to make it up. Meisvei. The Gemara says, how could that be? We have a pasuk which says, "Me'uvas lo yuchal liskon." Certain things, when you bend it out of shape, you cause a huge problem. You can't fix it. Some things are just not fixable once it gets ruined. The chesron, and it's a loss, lo yuchal limanos, it can't be made up. What is that? What does that refer to? What is something which is bent out of shape to the point where it can't be straightened, or a loss that can't be recovered? Me'uvas lo yuchal liskon, something which is broken, which can't be fixed. Zeh shebitil krish mashal arvis, v'kriyash mashal shachris, o tefillah shel arvis, o tefillah shel shachris. See very clearly, it seems like if a person misses either kriyashma or shachris, you missed it. It's too late. You can't rewind the clock. And therefore, it seems very clear, a person misses the tefillah of arvis, the evening tefillah, ma'ariv, there's no way to make it up. And the Gemara continues, the chesron lo yuchal limanos, a loss that can't be recovered, zeshen nimnu chaveru l'dvar mitzvah, his friends participated in a dvar mitzvah, however, v'lo nimno iman. He decided to ditch, he decided he's not going to do it. So again, his whole friend group went ahead, participated in the mitzvah, and he stayed home reading the newspaper. Person can't make up something like that. It's a loss which can't be recovered. So it seems very clear from this Gemara that there are certain tefillos which you can't make up. Amr Rav Yitzchak, Amr Rav Yochanan, Hacham Ha'eskina, and Shabito b'mezid. It's a very big difference between a person who misses a tefillah intentionally. He says, forget it. I'm not going to Ma'ariv tonight. I'm just too busy, or I'm too tired, too much on too much on my plate. Ma'ariv is just not important enough. That's something which can't be made up. However, when it comes to a person missing unintentionally by mistake, that's where a person can make up the missed tefillah. Rav Ashi says, Dekanami, it seems like that's the case. Ketani Bitel, a person was mevatel it. He took something, and it seems like he intentionally decided it's not worth anything to me, and therefore he didn't do it. Lo Ketani Ta doesn't say he made a mistake. Shma Mina, that he must be correct. So let's just talk for a minute about the proper time for tefillas mincha. So again, we mentioned yesterday that we try to be very careful with the zman for tefillas mincha. In Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Lamed Gimel, the Ramah, which is the opinion that we follow, the Mechaber is pretty long, and he goes back and forth with different opinions as to whether it's Shkia or it's Plaga Mincha. The Ramah writes as follows: Udidan and us b'medinos elu, in our communities, shenogin l'spal arvis mi Plaga Mincha. We have the custom of davening Ma'ariv from Plag HaMincha. Ein lo l'spal mincha achar kach. Person should not daven mincha after Plag HaMincha. Ubedieved o b'shasat chak yatsa. If a person did daven mincha after Plag, it's fine, or b'shasat chak, it's okay. Now, he says, mispal mincha ad alayla. Sorry. Ubedieved o b'shasat chak yatsa. Im mispal mincha ad alayla tahainu atzeis hakochav. Says the Ramah, b'diavad, person davens mincha all the way until tzeis hakochavim, he's yotze the mitzvah, which is interesting. Generally speaking, we're not noeg to cut off mincha at plag ha-mincha. Although in the summertime we do have a plag minyan here, which makes sense, and we'll explain that in a minute. Makes sense because according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's the zman. Mincha before plag, ma'ariv after plag. You can daven as much as you want; it's perfectly fine. But the Ramah is stretching this and telling us that a person could daven mincha all the way until tzeis hakochavim. It sounds like we should go to Rabbi Eichenstein's shul for that. We don't really find that many shuls here in town are going to daven mincha after shkia. So why is that? So now we have to learn the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah writes as follows: Tehainu at tzeis hakochavim, says the Mishnah Berurah, lav dafka. It's not really what it means. Why? De'erach reva shah kodem tzeis hakochavim bevade ben hashmasha su l'kuli alma. So approximately 15 minutes before Tzeis HaKochavim is certainly night. You can't daven Ma'ariv a half an hour after Shkia, says the Mishnah Berurah. Vein l'spal b'oso zman. El ratzalomar samach is that he meant to say close to that. Now, Vida, says the Chafetz Chaim in the Mishnah Berurah. Da'af sha'amachaber v'harama mashma. D'ladidan d'nogin l'spal Ma'ariv achar Tzeis HaKochavim mutter l'spal mincha filu achar Shkia. It seems like from both the Mechaber and from the Ramah that we daven Ma'ariv after Tzeis, and therefore a person could daven Mincha all the way up to Tzeis HaKochavim. He says, not so fast. Yesh poskim rabim shecholkim bazeh. There are many who disagree with this. V'daitam shetfilas Mincha hurak kodem shkias hachama. There are many poskim who say that mincha really only goes up until shkia, until sunset, which is well before tzeis hakochavim, before nightfall. V'lachein, lechatchila, certainly before the fact, tzarech kol adam lizar lispal kodem shkia sachama. Everyone has to be very careful to daven mincha all the time before sunset. Dafka. Dahainu sheyigmar tfilaso ba'od shlo niskasa hashemesh me'einenu. Person should finish davening before the sun disappears from our view. Now he says something very, very, very critical. Umutav lispal bizmana biyechidos. It's better for a person to daven mincha bizmana, and according to the zman that he's talking about, which means before shkia, milispalo achar kach betzipor. It's better to daven mincha on time without a minyan than to daven with a minyan after shkia. Ubedieved yuchal lismoich al dasam ekilim lispal achar shkia ad revasha kodem tzeis hakochavim. If you didn't daven, so it says the Mishnah Berurah, you didn't daven, so if it's still 15 minutes before nightfall, you could still daven mincha. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, we should not be doing that. So this is why generally speaking, in Ashkenazic Kehilas, unless you're in a Hasidic community, we're very careful to daven mincha before Shkia. It happens to be, as the one who makes the calendar here in the shul, sometimes we find ourselves with a bit of a conundrum. We didn't really talk about the split of Mincha Ma'ariv. The previous Mishnah Berurah actually talks about that, but he writes very clearly that if it's going to be very difficult for people to come out again, daven Ma'ariv again, you could certainly use Shkia as the cutoff. So you have Mincha before Shkia, Ma'ariv after Shkia, but sometimes the calendar is very tricky because when Shkia is moving at a rapid pace, it's sometimes hard to schedule Mincha at a time which is really Shaval Akol. Sometimes, if we make Mincha work, we usually give about 12 minutes for Mincha here in Shul. But the problem is, sometimes just because of the way that Shkia is moving, either we have to schedule Mincha where some days it's going to be maybe 17 minutes, or it could be the other way around, where there'll only be about 6 minutes. So from the beginning of the week, from Sunday to Thursday, you have such a large discrepancy. I usually try to err on the side of too much time, and like this, maybe you will say some Tehillim between Mincha and Ma'ariv. Like this, we don't start Ma'ariv until after Shkia. I prefer to do that because simple observation has led me to believe that sometimes, present company excluded, people come late to Mincha. So if a person's coming late to Mincha, then what happens is, if we're coming that close to Shkia, so then they might actually be davening their Shmon Esrei after Shkia, which is not good. It's not good because that's not what you're supposed to do. But it's even worse if you're davening Ma'ariv right away. So if you're davening Mincha after Shkia, and Ma'ariv before Tzeis, so then you find yourself in no man's land for your tefillah of Mincha and Ma'ariv. You can't say that it's time to daven Mincha after Shkia, and also time to daven Ma'ariv after Shkia before Tzeis. So therefore, I usually err on the side of caution and make it too much time. I've gotten some pushback sometimes say, how come there's 17 minutes for Mincha? It doesn't take 17 minutes for Mincha here in Shul. You're right. So say some more Tehillim between Mincha and Ma'ariv. But again, because of the recognition that people sometimes come late, I usually err on the side of caution. Just for one more thing to mention with regard to the Zman of Tefillah.
Is the goal to finish Mincha before Shkia or just to start it?
You should finish your Shmon Esrei before Shkia.
Oh, to finish.
Yeah. Yes. Now, what happens if a person, wakes up late? Again, this is not a very late rising shul, so it's not really so relevant to us, but maybe a person was driving throughout the night, they came home very late, they went to bed, and they slept through their alarm clock, and they woke up late. So now, the Zman Tefillah of Shachar says, Zman Tefillah HaShachar, this is in Siman Peites, it starts from Netzachama, as we mentioned, and he says at the end, V'im ta o avar hispalal achar abar shos, a person ends up davening after 4 hours, afal pi, she'ein lo, schar tefillah bizmana, even though the schar tefillah on time is not there, schar tefillah mi'ika, our Gemara. Mechaber Pasuk is like our Gemara. Now, v'achar chatzos, after chatzos, osir lehispalel tefillas shachris. It's forbidden to daven tefillas shachris, which is interesting. Why should it be osir to daven shachris? Again, we mentioned in today's Gemara that tefillah is rachamei. Whenever you want compassion, go ahead and daven. So now, there's an interesting thing about how this works, but the Mishnah Berurah writes, Mashma miloshen harav, dafilu tekef achar chatzos, asr l'spal shachris. You can't daven shachris after chatzos. Now, why is that? We pretty much ran out of time, but he basically explains that although we wait a half hour after chatzos to daven mincha, that's not really me'ikar adin. Me'ikar adin, you could really daven mincha from chatzos. The reason why we don't do that is because of the imperfection of clocks be able to tell us time. Our clocks are pretty perfect now, but again, we don't change this, and therefore, you wait till a half an hour after chatzos. Now, that being the case, since it's already technically the zman for mincha, it would be inappropriate for a person to daven shachris then. So what does he say to do? Alkain, kishashagag o nenas. when a person made a mistake, or an ones, an unforeseeable circumstance came up, v'lo ispal kodem chatzos, yamtin achar chatzos chatzisha, wait a half an hour, v'yispalo mincha, person should daven mincha, and then v'achar kach shachar or shachar b'taras hashlama. Afterwards, he davens a second tefillah as tashlumin. So we'll stop here for tonight. Tomorrow night, Mitzvah Shem, Reb Chaim is going to be giving the shir, and tomorrow's Gemara discusses a lot about tashlumin. Some very exciting topics come up about tashlumin. What happens when you miss a davening, but the next davening is not parallel? So, for example, you miss davening on Shabbos, the next davening is a different type of davening. Or you miss davening on Erev Shabbos, the next davening is a Shabbos davening. So we'll discuss that, Mitzvah Shem, tomorrow night. Have a wonderful evening.